Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State Podcast, brought to you by the Michigan Brewers Guild, celebrating 25 years of camaraderie. The Great Beer State Podcast shares the stories of our member breweries and the rich community of Michigan beer and brewing. Listen in, have a beer, and then check out mibeer.com for a full listing of member breweries, events, and more opportunities to explore and support the Great Beer State. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State Podcast. My name's Fred. I'm here with Scott, and we're here with the fifth episode of season 3. We're going to feature Tanya and Patrick of Tantrick Brewing in Allegan, and get to a brewer's dozen here in a little bit. We are approaching the third annual inaugural Spring Beer Festival in Traverse City. So Scott, I'm sure you have updates around that. And I wonder what else is going on in the world of Michigan beer and brewers.
Yeah, probably by the time this podcast is up, we'll be having the festival. But I've been to the site a few times trying to figure out exactly what it's going to look like and how it's going to work. And so that it's getting me excited to see things happen in person. But we're looking forward to our first spring beer festival in Traverse City after waiting for a couple of years through COVID. So things are looking good. We're hoping to have good weather. It's always, I think I probably mentioned this in the last episode, but the first year or two of any of our festivals, I think are really fun to look back on and remember, because they invariably have fewer participants. It takes a while to build attendance, and you also get to remember the things that were kind of screwed up or maybe could have been executed better. You put plans on paper, and it's always, that's one thing. And it sometimes it becomes really obvious as soon as you get set up and get going where your mistakes are, or at least where some of them are. So it's always fun to reminisce about what you did wrong or what could have been better, way back when. But I'm also a believer that, these are the good old days. We reminisce about the good old days, but it's always important to keep in mind that these are the good old days right now too.
That's right. Well, my guess, if we think about the festival's earliest days, I'm thinking you probably won't run out of ice, and you probably won't lose the pretzels out of the back of a pickup truck, which were two of the, concerning calamities of festival number 1.
Yes, exactly my point. It's fun to remember those things.
Folklore has it that there was an urgent call for ice put out on the local news during an interview. We've yet to have that video surface, but if anybody has it. So I think you're probably farther ahead here on what's now our 5th festival in terms of individual festivals in the year. So we've gotten the startup figured out a little bit better.
Yeah, and rounding out the geography to have the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, to have a festival there. Sure, Traverse City is kind of northwest, but there's a great beer community. It's a little bit bigger population there. Our partnership with the ballpark, the Pit Spitters folks, who are the same ownership as the Whitecaps. It just makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of synergy there to be working with them and their infrastructure. So I'm really confident that it's going to be a great event and grow into a bigger and long-term great event.
So what are a couple of the differences that'll be here and not at the other festivals? Is there a difference in terms of which breweries might attend that might not be at the other ones, or how many, and anything else?
We've got really strong participation. I think we're at 99, which is a really high number. I think people are looking forward to going to the new venue as breweries. We're inside the ballpark, which is different for us. Well, we did it one year. That's another story. But, being inside the ballpark, we're utilizing the concourse area. And the ballpark at Turtle Creek Stadium has this kind of park-like area out beyond the outfield. And there's a road out there we can use to load in and load out, but the grass is kind of rolling too. It's not real flat, so it limits spaces where we can go. So we've got a very unique layout, and it's quite spread out. And I think it will have a really open and comfortable feel. It's definitely going to be something different than what we've seen at any of the other festivals, although it'll be sort of reminiscent too. It's going to feel a little bit like being out in a park, like the Summer Beer Festival. But you've got this combination between, the setting of the ballpark and what it has visually, the building there with the concourse and then the outfield area, or beyond the outfield, I call it. So the layout's going to be different. I think we've just got a great lineup of breweries, some new ones, many of the favorites. It's certainly not pulling just from the kind of geography in northern lower Michigan. We've got UP breweries, lots of them from southern Michigan. So we're
And how does that brewery number compare to, say, like Summer Beer Festival or UP Fall Beer Fest?
So UP has grown to more than 100 now. Post COVID, our number of breweries is down slightly. I don't think you really notice it as a guest at the festival, but it is down slightly. Even the recent Winter Festival, I think we had 120 when we may have had 140 before. So again, you don't really notice it, but indeed it's a little bit smaller. But when you think of a maximum number that we've seen, which would be, more like 130 or 140 at the Winter or Summer Festival, to have almost 100 here right out of the gates is, I really appreciate all of our members being willing to put the time and energy into coming and promote their beer and support what we're doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds exciting. Looking forward to being there. And seems like a good time to jump into Brewer's Dozen.
Yeah, well, we're working our way alphabetically through, and the point of the Brewer's Dozen is to try and talk about all of our brewery members throughout the course of the podcast. So we have been highlighting 13, and we're taking an alphabetical trip through the lineup, and we're going to start today at Blackfire Winery, which also has a brewery, but Blackfire Winery is in Tecumseh, Michigan.
And then we'll add Black Rock's Brewery in Marquette. And I feel like adding a comment here because I think it's interesting, especially as we're moving through the phases here with the pandemic and everything. I teach a class at Schoolcraft College on basically operations and marketing for brewing and distilling. And one of the big significant things we talk about is how this reality that every brewery and distillery has a tasting room is such a shift from where our industry grew from, which was that sale by the glass to the consumer was prohibited. And then it wasn't. So the modern day brew pub and microbrewery and brewer being able to sell beer to the consumers, it's for people coming into the industry now, it's hard to imagine a world without it. But we were born from not having it. And I say that because, and sorry for this tangent, but as we go through these Brewers Dozens, this is an encouragement to go visit breweries that you haven't seen or maybe haven't tried their product, and visit them if you have seen them. But especially, there's opportunities here to go visit and have a beer and check somebody out in a way that prior to 1993 was impossible. So sorry for the tangent, but I was moved to say this has a reason. We have a purpose to reminding you where all these breweries are. So you can go put your butt in their seat and drink a beer.
Yeah, so we'll move on to Blake's Brewing Company in Armada, and Blake's is very well known for their cider, but they also make some great beers and have a nice brewing operation going there as well.
And in Howell, we've got Block Brewing Company.
And a second offshoot of Block is Block Brewing Company Brighton in Brighton.
And in Ann Arbor, we've got Blue Tractor.
Yep. And heading over to the east side, Boathouse Beer Company and Boozery is a brew pub restaurant in Tawa City.
And then we got Brass Ring Brewing Company in Grand Rapids.
And Brew Detroit in Detroit.
And up in Holland or over in Holland, we've got Brewery 424.
Brewery Becker In Brighton, their interesting thing about Matt is he's very interested in old historic beer styles and historic beer styles, and he researches them and goes to great effort to replicate lesser known traditional, or maybe even not what you traditionally think of beer styles, but Brewery Becker, Brighton.
And over in Traverse City, home of the Spring Beer Festival, we got Brewery Terra Firma.
And we'll wrap things up with Brewery Vivant in Grand Rapids.
All right. A tour with a tangent. So next up, we've got Tantrick Brewing Company in Allegan, Michigan. Allegan's sort of in my neck of the woods, and I've been really encouraged to see the growth of breweries there. It was sort of a gap for a little while. It's sort of between Kalamazoo and Holland. And so it's been great to see it as a local kind of grow up and now be the home to a couple of breweries. And it was great to sit with Tanya and Patrick and learn more about their story and their sort of rapid fire path into being brewery owners.
Yeah, one of the things that really stood out for me, and I think it's something that's interesting to note through all these different interviews we're sharing with the podcast, is you can listen to some where somebody started their brewery and there were no resources and people didn't understand what they were doing. They were really borderline out of their minds to be doing what they were doing. And you fast forward to the more recent conversations, and people are able to open, they can find resources. Patrick mentions that, one of the main questions that the city of Allegan had for them was how soon they would be open. So it's really great that the industry has developed and made it more possible for newer and more breweries to open. And this is one of those fun stories.
Yeah, I think you're able to see the maturation of the industry and the story in both what you said. Breaking down what you said into a couple of pieces is that one, the larger community is craft ready, is ready to try those beers and support it as consumers. And then the infrastructure, city planning, zoning, finance, those industries or groups of infrastructure that make up the infrastructure, they used to be a barrier, and now they're usually seeking breweries and looking to support instead of sort of kicking the tires and saying no, which, we go back far enough, was the reputation.
Indeed. So it's good to see that evolve and change.
Yeah. And it was amazing also to think about the timeline that they were able to pull off.
Previously I was really surprised by that. You don't hear that too often. And
no.
My guess is that they were probably a lot more savvy to the process and what they're doing and how to do some of the administrative work than they let on. But if you're contemplating opening a brewery, I would go have a couple of beers and get to know Patrick and Tanya, because they obviously did a few things right in the planning process.
And they've moved. They've done it twice, really, to some degree. So, and I think it's both. I think it shows their amount of savvy and stick-to-itiveness. And I think it shows what's possible when the community and industry and infrastructure support it, that things move in a different way, and never hurts to imagine it and then see if it's possible, because it might just be. I think that's what they found. So I enjoyed it a lot. I think it's I think one of the things I've enjoyed about this arc of interviewing people too is that this is a pair of youthful, energetic voices that are part of the growth of our community and our guild, as well as that they're they have a little bit of both. They understand, they've seen and been through some history with us, but at the same time, they're bringing in a younger operator's modern point of view, which I think is really important for people to hear. And it's important to make room for that voice to have room to be heard, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And you're right. Any industry needs to have new, younger people bringing new energy, different viewpoints into it to keep it kind of fresh and vibrant. And I think we certainly have that going all across the state with breweries.
All right. So we'll hand it off to Tanya and Patrick. We interviewed them. We were in Traverse City, but Tantrick Brewing is in Allegan, Michigan. And here's a chat from January 2022 at the Winter Brewers, the Great Beer State Conference. Take it away. All right, Tanya, Patrick, welcome. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So we're talking to people about the stories of the Michigan Brewers Guild, of the breweries in the Michigan Brewers Guild, and we'd love to hear a little bit about yours. When did you first imagine opening a brewery?
So the idea of starting a brewery happened very quickly for us, which we know is not the norm. We decided to do this and jump right in after Patrick got laid off from his job. I was burnt out in my job, and we decided to take a leap. And so December of 2017, we started planning. In July of 2018, we opened the doors.
Wow, that is a fast turnaround. And what was your brewery imagination like, or beer or brewing imagination like prior to that? Hey, this is an opportunity to open a brewery. What was your relationship to beer and brewing prior to that?
I think a lot of the decision was balancing due to the circumstances we had, was either, look for something else and keep afloat, or try to build something and run with it. And we decided to build something. At the time, we felt young enough to take on some challenges. And
Patrick had been a home brewer for about 10 years and started brewing before I met him, and I had brewed a little bit before I met him. And so that was something we had in common when we met and kind of built our relationship on beer. And it just was a common interest. And then when we were at the spot in our lives where we were like, all right, we have to either decide to do this or try to do something else, there wasn't really any other path we wanted to take together. So it worked out, and I loved his beer. I didn't need to brew anymore because his beer was way better than mine. So I just encouraged him and wanted to share his beer with everybody. And so far, I guess I have good taste because everybody seems to like it.
Awesome. So tell me, it sounds like it was about 8 or 9 months or something like that. So what's the thumbnail sketch? How did you find space, and what were you hoping would be the sort of hallmarks of Tantrick Brewing Company?
One of the biggest challenges we faced was, where do we do it? We pretty much did it self-financed, so we had limitations what we couldn't do. We wanted to find something that could be easily transformed into kind of what we were thinking without being too much. So we found a good place in Allegan. We initially wanted to be in a larger city like Kalamazoo. We both lived in Kalamazoo for 20 years. But I've always had the fond belief that every small town needs a small brewery. So we were kind of went out to areas around Kalamazoo to try to find some places that we thought would be quite fitting. And I grew up in Wayland, and Allegan wasn't far from it. And then we actually found a location that was pretty optimal to what we thought we would need. And we were
6 months free rent didn't hurt the decision.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to transform that space into what we created and launch it in July and kind of ran with it.
Awesome. Was there something that what were you imagining were the most important things about your brewery in terms of either the space or the style of beer that you're making or the way you're going to connect to people? Did you have priorities in mind in terms of here's what's really important?
We had a couple. We wanted to be a part of the community and be a place where people can come together, socialize, meet people, engage in their own communities, engage with each other. And then from the beer perspective, we wanted to have a mix of products that could be good for most beer drinkers and appease a lot of palates. And then when we first opened, we rotated beers a lot, so we didn't really have any mainstays open. We kind of felt our market out and saw what kind of fit. And then from there, we jumped into what can we do to build on this in our community.
It was important to us too to open with a variety, including ciders and wines, so that people who didn't realize yet that they liked beer would still feel comfortable there. We wanted to be welcoming and open to everybody, especially moving to a small community. We knew we were going to have to get to know the community before they would embrace us, and that happened very quickly for us, thankfully. Allegan has been a really great town, and lots of amazing people that have just right from the beginning, they've been just huge fans. So it's been really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that kind of led into what I was going to ask about, which is what that first reception was like. I mean, you're in short of a year and now you're looking at, customers in your space drinking your beer. What was that reception like, and what was the feedback like?
So one of the things that really kind of set us up, I think, in Allegan is that there had been a brewery located in that spot before that had closed down about a year before we opened. Unfortunately, the owner had passed away, kind of fell apart, and then it's almost like the community was just waiting for the next brewery to come along. So when we came, immediately our mug club sold out. Like, they were just ready. They embraced us right away. So it was pretty cool.
Awesome. And the response to the beers, you've got this variety on tap and a thirsty audience.
Beers,
Started with 8, and we added root beer, and then we added some wines we made, and we added a few more beers on draft. So we ended up having 13 or something.
13, 14 taps at that location. Yeah.
And then we ended up upgrading our draft tower and added a couple more. So in the end, we had like 15 beers and 50 mix of beers, ciders, and wines on tap. So
nice. And can you share a little bit about your decision to? It sounds like you chose a microbrewer's license, and so when you're opening, you have, this path to decide: do we want to be a brew pub and or do we, want to be a microbrewery? What went through your minds in terms of making that decision?
That wasn't really a hard decision. We didn't want to do food.
Yeah.
We just felt like you have to be passionate about something to do it well, and neither one of us are passionate about making food. So
another part of that was leveraging our space. We had limited space. We wanted to optimize it with the brewing side of it. We did have, part of our plan was to bring in food trucks. So initially we had a lot of food trucks coming in, as much as we could get them, to kind of balance it out a little bit.
Yeah. And so now in the, I guess 5 years since, you've got a few years before the world went upside down and you have to really figure things out. How did things progress, and what did you find most surprising about the evolution? And
so we had to make a gigantic pivot when COVID struck, and our tap room closed down. We went to purely packaging and packaged goods and to-go sales. But during all that, we had plans to move and expand. So we were already looking into spaces available for move our tap room and our production. So kind of balancing that with COVID was quite challenging, but
it was important to us to own our buildings instead of leasing. We started out leasing a space, as I said, but making any kind of a real investment in our business, we just wanted to own it. And so pretty early on, we started looking at, as soon as we knew that we were where we wanted to be as in Allegan, then we started looking for properties and spaces that would work. We looked at one place that was probably way too big. Would have been really cool, but that fell through. And then we started working with a realtor who had this really cool office space right on the riverfront. And we were kind of joking with him at first. We're like, you should just sell us your office. This would be perfect. And a few months into kind of working with him, he's like, you're right. This is where you guys should be. You should be on the riverfront. This is a great spot for a tap room. let's try to find something that works with you having like a brewery over here and a tap room here, because downtown Allegan's pretty small. Wasn't really a great option for one building to expand into, so we ended up doing 2 buildings.
Couple blocks apart.
A couple blocks apart. We started the process in like February, right before COVID hit, and so it took a little bit longer than we planned to do the financing part of it. But once we did, we hit the ground running. We closed in October on both the buildings.
2020.
In 2020, and then we opened the doors on St. Patrick's Day 2021 at our new location.
Wow.
So it was a whirlwind of a year, but it was a nice distraction from COVID. We were busy. We had a lot to do.
Well, congratulations. That's hard to do and very exciting. And so I hear what you're saying there, that those were plans that were part of the arc you were on pre-COVID, and then they kind of hit a COVID prism and, changed a little bit, but
We were determined to not let
forward.
that stop our plans. So we know COVID is temporary, even though it feels very permanent right now. It's not. We know it's not. So.
Yeah. So what do you think a small brewery, and now you're not the only brewery in Allegan anymore, right?
Correct.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
a-
Actually, Shaindorf opened about a year after we did on the brewing side, and they're a brew pub. It's been really good for Allegan, I think, to have 2 breweries right downtown. We're a few blocks away, and then with COVID, the only good thing to come out of COVID is the social district, right? So people can kind of buy beers and walk between and have this
all downtown Allegan.
great experience in Allegan, and having another brewery there is just it's a great draw. The brewer there, Kyle, and his wife Nicole, are super nice. We have talked with them on more than one occasion, collaborated on some ideas. We have more to come. It's just they're a very different brewing style than we are. They're a very different restaurant than what we have in our new location, and so it's a good variety for Allegan. It's been great.
Hey Brett, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
I want to try to get some light on the brim of your hat.
I mean,
Yeah, it looks great when you look up, but when you're looking right at Fred, your eyes are a little bit hidden.
so look at a few feet above Fred.
You do you. Phil. Seth will figure it out.
Oh yeah, even that's just better. Make sure it's not in the window. Okay.
So whether you talk specifically about Allegan or overall, I'd love to hear about, now that you've had this experience, I'd love to talk about what sort of impact can a brewery have on a small town? Like what's changed in Allegan now that it has a brewery, now that it has 2 breweries? How have those breweries changed the culture or community of Allegan?
It's kind of hard to explain. We see day-to-day being there. You see like the liveliness, the functions of downtown, and the events and the people coming through, and I think it creates a sense of more of a community. I think it kind of brings people out and together more, and we're hoping that it'll kind of relate to other businesses coming into town and starting up and creating new foundations. And we already see it with a few businesses here and there, but I think it's a start of kind of like a rejuvenation or reinvigorating the community. And a lot of that is just people related, bringing people together and getting people out and try to encourage that.
I think part of what people really are intrigued by with breweries is the craftness of it and the creative side of it. They come in and they love our beer names and our, beer mugs that we have, these beautiful glass beer mugs for our mug club, and glass tap handles. And we took a lot of care to make sure that we paid attention to all the details and made it a space that reflected the amount of creative and craftiness that we put into our beer. And people see that and they appreciate it, and it's not just going into the next bar.
Mm-hmm.
It means a lot more than that.
Yeah, and I get that sense, having been around Allegan kind of on either side of it for a number of years. I mean, it's just exciting to feel that energy from you two, and to feel the energy of a couple breweries in a social district seems outlandishly positive.
It's been
new friend.
amazing.
I kind of like to mention this too, where how many breweries have a zip line in their backyard
There you go.
Definitely.
going across the river, Kalamazoo River.
The riverfront is really cool.
Yeah.
It's a splash pad,
Nice.
zip line. We just opened up, so we call the social district the SODI for short, and we just opened up, added a space in the building next to us, calling it the SODI shop. So instead of coming into the tap room to get your social district beer, you can just walk right up to it and get yourself a beer. We opened it for New Year's Eve. It was pretty cool. There's a couple thousand people down there watching the ball drop and fireworks, and
Nice.
got our SODI beers right on the riverfront. So it's exciting.
It's very exciting. So besides the community of Allegan, your community, when you think about your relationship with, personally, your understanding of your relationship with the brewing community, either as drinkers, as home brewers, and then eventually brewing operators. Tell me a little bit about how that's changed over the years, and kind of how you see the brewing community at large and the Michigan brewing scene. What does that mean to you, and how has it evolved?
We started out as passionate craft beer drinkers, like when each of us met, and I've been since I've been in Kalamazoo since 2000, and Bell's was our forte. It was
Home bar.
yeah, which has always been great. So I mean, going from a craft beer drinker to a craft brewer, home brewer per se, then jumping into the craft brewing business, there's a lot you kind of learn and experience along the way, and you meet a lot of great people. The community's fantastic. Everyone's willing to chat and talk talk beer. It's been great. Every brewer we met, and we keep meeting new ones. We've made some really good relationships. It's just been solid.
And it definitely can be a little bit intimidating sometimes. Starting out the first couple of years, like neither one of us had any background in working in commercial brewing, and so talking to people, is a little bit of a challenge. Sometimes you feel a little bit intimidated until you realize, everybody is at that point at some point. Like, you're not born with this knowledge. You don't know this knowledge. Like, you learn it by doing, and you learn it by interacting with people, and then it just becomes an experience instead of something that you're trying to conquer, So it's just a great community to be a part of. And from, coming to places like this where you get to talk to the people growing the malt and the hops and making the equipment, they have just as much passion about the beer as we do making the beer, even though they're just that little part of it. And it's a great community.
Awesome. What would you say to somebody if you met them downstairs, later tonight or tomorrow, and they were a brewery in planning, and if you saw yourselves in them a little bit, as they were saying, well, we hope to have a brewery open next year. What do you think would be your words of encouragement or advice towards somebody just starting a brewery now?
There's so much I would say to me 4 years ago. Mostly, I think.
Start with a business plan for sure.
Yeah, plan out
have
what
some
you
kind
need.
of concept, and then look into the MLCC, TTB requirements. Talk to your local inspectors, your local municipality, the local mayor, for example, and your city councils. So talk to everybody, and man, that's a good start.
It's a good start, really. And
And did you guys do that early, or did you feel like you played catch up with the municipality and the mayor and all that stuff?
We've had pretty good idea doing our due diligence, kind of what needed to be done to start a brewery, per se. And then once we found the location, that kind of started a lot of different conversations within your local communities, because you have to have their approval to even
yeah,
get started.
It did all happen very quickly, but we kind of knew what steps we needed to take, because we had done our kind of just researching it.
Yeah, and I would
understanding it.
suggest talking to as many local breweries as you can, if you can, and just chatting them up and see what's going on, and try to get some words of wisdom, ideas, encouragement, that it'll help to fast track it. And then if I were to start a brewery right now, I'd find a place and get licensing going, and then figure the rest out because that takes the longest.
Yeah, and that's coming from people who probably broke a speed record.
Yeah,
terms of
we have a
getting
couple
licensed
times,
in 8
even moving,
months.
like to move our locations, and so now we have 2 licensed addresses.
Yep.
That took longer to move than our initial licensing did. So it's kind of crazy, but I don't know. I also I feel like so many people don't really have the self-confidence and don't really, they care too much about what other people think. Like, fuck them all. But really, we had people tell us, oh, you're not opening with food, you're not going to make it. We had people tell us, but you're brewing in plastic fermenters? That's not going to work. We got all this fancy equipment over here. We'll be fine. I'm like, no. Do you. Do what makes sense for you. You don't need a lot of money to make good beer. You can do it with what you've got and put your heart in it and be genuine about it, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, right on. Well, I think I'm good unless you guys have any thoughts you want to add, questions you want to ask. We'll do the anniversary thing, but
Yeah. The
that felt
there was something back there where you were either talking about the process or it came up again with business plan, but there was something where you named the process, but you didn't say what that process was. And I don't know if it makes sense for this interview, but I was just curious. But then the interview kept going, and I don't remember what it was you were talking about.
Was it pertaining to starting a brewery?
That was one of them, but there was an earlier one too that it was probably related to that. Yeah.
oh yeah.
So
This process
So I
of like
guess maybe-
starting
maybe just
licensing and all
try-
that.
try this. Explain to Fred, even though I'm talking now, say everything to Fred. Walk us through that startup from nothing process in more detail, because that's really interesting to me, especially because of the insane turnaround that you guys did. Plus, maybe you can dovetail it into all the haters that said, "What, fucking plastic?"
Yeah, so maybe I'll form that into a question. So, can you either of you or both of you walk us through sort of that fast track of opening in 8 months? Like, what came first? What were the steps that were
So-
successful that then
Sorry,
moved
let
into the
Andy-
next step?
Yeah.
So for us, kind of jumping into it full bore, a good friend of mine opened a local brewery in Michigan. This was a couple years before we started to do it, but we kind of worked with them a little bit and kind of helped them where we could with their build out and their planning, and their brewing essentially to start. So it kind of gave us a little bit of a glimpse into what was all kind of going on without really getting into it. So when we decided to do it, a big part was reaching out to them as a kind of hey man,
It's
where'd
kind
you
of
guys
like if
start?
they can do it, we can do it.
So another good example of reaching out to your local breweries. So we worked with them, and they kind of gave us a general idea of what was required, and then from there, we kind of dove into Google searches of Michigan licensing requirements, federal licensing requirements, local licensing requirements, and then hammered out a business plan overnight, all night. And then part of that was trying to find and scout a location where we could open, as well as looking into financial options to see if we would be able to get any kind of financial assistance through local banking establishments. So we ended up going through all that. We actually started working with a lawyer that specializes in breweries and liquor licenses. So that kind of helped us as far as with the timeline and expediting it.
She put us on the right track early on. So that was very helpful.
So from there, we kind of jumped into that. I got paperwork prepared for that. Then we found a location. That was kind of difficult because it's leasing and working with them, but we got that all squared away. And then once you have that, we had to go through our local city So you need their approval for licensing, for having a tap room at least. So we got on their schedule. We had to talk to them about getting on their agenda and what we were planning to do. And then that goes on to their city council, and they have to vote you in. Once they approve it, you send that to your licensing committees, and that kind of starts the process.
And how did that reception? How was that reception? Was there difficulty? Were there questions? Was there excitement?
The only question they had was, how soon will you be open?
Nice.
So
They
I
were
actually
very excited.
I scheduled prior to the city council meeting. I scheduled an appointment with the city mayor and the chief of police at the time, because we didn't really have many contacts now, like at that time. So kind of just let's
Feeling it
dive
out.
in, see what happens, and it was extremely positive, and it kind of justified us in our decision to go there and just talking with them and getting an idea of how they felt about the community, where they kind of wanted it to go, and how we could impact that. And then we went out to the city council, and that was great. And then from there, it was doing more of the licensing. There's an inspection, like with the MLCC. They come out and they
An
not
investigation. An
investigator.
investigation.
Yep.
They want to know your history. They want to make sure you're not, laundering money for something.
If you have anything to hide, you're not going to hide it with them.
They look at your background to make sure you're not,
Getting money from the mob or something like that.
So they're very thorough in their investigations. So just put it all out there. Like
They were great to work with.
he had an MIP from when he was like 20
yeah,
years,
17.
and I mean he had to write a letter about that. So you just put it all out there to begin with, because they're gonna know everything.
Awesome. And you still got open in 9
Yeah.
months.
Yep. So it was great. The MLCC actually, the Michigan licensing came in really quick. The TTB took forever. We actually wrote our state representative. And then the next day we had approval from the TTB. So I don't know if it really helped or anything.
I don't think it helped. I think it was coming anyways, but
Yeah.
whatever.
So close to wrapping up, what do you think is, so as this is a Michigan Brewers Guild project, but we talk about the strength of community. You've already talked about the camaraderie between brewers and overall sense of community, but what do you think is important about having trade associations like the Michigan Brewers Guild, either in general or the Michigan Brewers Guild specifically? How do you think that's helped the industry and the community for Michigan brewers in the last 25 years?
I think partly for me, it's having a group, kind of like solidarity, that stick together and have similar views and concepts and goals and ambitions, and trying to make it better for the craft, not just craft beer industry, but the craft industry, especially beer, to move forward and do great things and help to build our business and our local communities.
I think it's been instrumental in helping our industry become something that people take a little more seriously. It's our businesses, our small businesses that we operate in all of these little towns and cities even, are just we employ people. We have hardworking people. We're a place where people get to come together, and it's meaningful to the communities. And I think having the strength in numbers through an association like the Guild has been instrumental in making things happen, like upping the self-distribution limit. That was really exciting for us, being able to see a little bit more of a future in that for us. So
It's like advocating as a group
yeah.
versus on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you for bringing Tantrick Brewing Company to life and contributing your beers and your space and your sense of community to it all. Really grateful for that.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks for listening, watching, and sharing Michigan's Great Beer State podcast, supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. Interviews featured here have been included in the book A Rising Tide, Stories of the Michigan Brewers Guild. They'll also be in the Great Beer State documentary coming out in July of 2022. Visit mibeer.com for brewery information, beer festivals, and 25th anniversary celebrations. We appreciate the support and encourage you to like, subscribe, and give us a review. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer. Cheers.